Hi, wow, it's been a while. Something around I'm a poorly drawn YouTube guy. Just be grateful I didn't disappear for literally 18 months. I did post about this in my topics, but the main reason I left is my mic and my audio have been busted on my laptop for a very long time, and since I've been in Korea, I wasn't able to fix it. But we're back, and welcome back, bros. I'm gonna be honest with you. I got about nothing left to say on the topic of self improvement and all that. Last piece of advice I'll give you is as follows. If they don't invite you to do things outside of school or whatever you go, they aren't your real friends, they're just school friends. Just make sure that you make real friends through clubs, social events. And if you can't, you're the problem. Anyway, as a complete tone shift today, I'm going to be talking about the nonsense in between Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and other Central Asian countries and how hilarious they are. So, to start us off, we gotta define Central Asia. Okay, cool. So, Central Asia, for the most part, is like if you took the Balkans and you just slapped it into Asia. Most of these countries hate each other and fight over whose horrible country is better and live under very oppressive governments. Now, if you're still here at this point, you may have already heard about the joys of Turkmenistan, who they are, what they do. But realistically, you've never heard of the other countries, other than maybe Kazakhstan, which you only know from Borat. First, let's show off some of the wonders that all these countries share. Central Asia is the first region in the world that has many mathematical and scientific achievements. One such achievement, which you may know, was invented by this guy who wrote this little known book called Al-Jabbar, which to this day makes school leaders think that they are somehow similar to Einstein, and it's the school's fault they can't understand math. Then they go off, try to work in business, fail because they never learn math, and then as they sit there at 40, nothing to show for it. Then you can think back and know. It was all Borat's fault. Something else that defines all of Central Asia is causing a lot of conflicts is their funky borders. During the time of the USSR, they sort of forced a bunch of nomadic tribes to become states. For the most part, this didn't matter because the USSR mediated all conflicts they had. Doing their best UK impression, they just kind of drew border lines wherever they felt like. And again, when the USSR ran, this wouldn't matter. But once the USSR fell, these countries, like every creation in the 1990s, became incredibly annoying and poor. These funky borders have everyone's favorite thing, enclaved, because these things never cause conflict ever. A good example as to how messed up these borders are, let's look at the Sak exclave. It is a piece of Uzbekistan inside of Kyrgyzstan, whose population is mostly Tajik. I'll talk more in depth about these enclaves, exclaves, and all that junk later in the relation section. The last little bit of shared culture that Central Asia has is sports. Buzkashi, this sport, let's see if I'm reading this right, is similar to polo if you played it with a rotting, decapitated goat carcass. Fun for the whole family. For obvious reasons, I cannot go much further into detail about this wonderful sport, but you can imagine relatively what that looks like. There's also Kiz Ku, which a man and a woman race on a horse. If he wins, he gets to kiss her. If she wins, she gets to beat him with a whip, just like I'll beat you if you don't press that subscribe button. Now I want to get into each individual country's horseshit. I'm going to start out with the most well-known country, Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country in the world. It is home to 18.27 million people. Its main export is oil. It is the richest country in Central Asia, which is like being the smartest sibling when all your brothers are 5, but let's let them have it. Kazakhstan is also obsessed with horses, like Mr. Hand's levels of obsessed. Horse meat is a staple in their diet, to the point where they requested it being served in the Olympics. Their national drink is also horse milk. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, just milking the horse. Man, your horse milk is the best in town. How do you finesse these udders like that? Udders? Kazakhstan also has an unofficial taxi system, where people wave on the street until a car stops. The destination and price are discussed as they go. I tried this in America, but I woke up in a bathtub missing a kidney, so I got one more chance at this before it becomes an issue. There's a wedding tradition known as Alip Kashu. A woman is taken to the female members of the man's family, in which they plan to marry, and is made to accept a necktie that symbolizes the consent to the marriage. What if she doesn't want to go? They just kidnap her. Kazakhstan is a completely landlocked country, which has not stopped it from creating a powerful navy with 14 patrol boats. This powerful, mighty navy typically just makes sure that their ships aren't bombed out of the Caspian Sea, which is also notably landlocked. The politics of Kazakhstan are similar to Borat in the sense that they are notably strange. Speaking of Borat, in 2012, when a Kazakh won the gold medal for a shooting competition in Kuwait, they played the Borat national anthem, not the real one. Go ahead and read these lyrics and look at her face. So inspired. Back to the topic at hand, the politics of Kazakhstan are very funny. Everything about politics in this country, not within the last 4 years, has been through Nursultan Nazarbayev. He is the former dictator of Kazakhstan with the motto, economics now, politics later. Except he left out the whole part of economics for himself. While unpopular, his economic success is undoubtedly the greatest as the aforementioned largest economy in Central Asia. He belongs to the Amanat Party, which is just a catch-all party with no real set beliefs, with a really tech corporation logo. While no longer president, as per Kazakh law, he is now senator for life and will never have to be elected again. Also, the current president is his puppet, but yeah, that's whatever.
Now let's talk about Kyrgyzstan, the generator of Central Asia. They generate the most energy, they generate the most conflict with exclaves, they generate the Black Death. You know, normal stuff. It isn't all bad, as Kyrgyzstan has an eternal friendship agreement with Turkey, which is not a mistranslation, and the aforementioned Kazakhstan acts as a big brother to the country, which is incredibly similarly culturally.
Except that Kyrgyzstan has much more mountain variants. One difference is they think that bread is holy in the country and cannot be wasted. They are very similar to my aunt because they both live in Kyrgyzstan. This mountain variance is strong as they hosted the first ever Nomad Olympics. This country is the poorest in the region, and with an average IQ of 90, it isn't too hard to see why. The country has an intense incest prevention system, which you memorize your lineage up to the 7th generation on the male side. Alabamans would hate it here. What, would you rather have said Pakistan? They have several landmarks, such as the Big Salt Lake, along with a landmark known as the Borat Tower, which is one of the oldest still standing structures in the world. Except for the time it fell, with a Sleeping Beauty-esque lore around it. Except instead of it being a spindle, it was a spider, and instead of falling asleep, she just died. Thrilling storytelling. Speaking of storytelling, their national hero Manas has a crazy long story, being 20 times larger than the Odyssey. This guy is everywhere, and almost every city has a statue of him. He is known for forming the country under 40 tribes, which is what Kazakhstan roughly translates to, the land of the 40 tribes. Politics of Kyrgyzstan are frankly the most democratic in the region, with them overthrowing 3 presidents since 2005. When they became too authoritarian around 3 years ago, the president was overthrown, and they gave the powers of president and prime minister to one Sadir Japarov, who was in jail for kidnapping and sentenced for 11 years. They are the most normal political system in the region. When I said that Central Asia is Balkan levels of stupid, I mean it. The next country on the funny block is Turkmenistan. Nicknamed the North Korea of Central Asia, you know it's going to be good. This country is crazy isolationist, so any statistics on it would be hard to verify. So I'll just go with what I can see for accuracy's sake. And if I'm blatantly wrong, that's never stopped me before. Everything in this country starts with the president, Sapurat Niziayev. I can't even begin to describe the creature that this man is. So as an isolationist dictatorship tends to do, try to form a cult around himself, with the only real education in school being a book called the Ruhnama, where he said he got a vision from his ancestors on how to run the country. I'm getting a vision from the ancestors. He said to be a good person, to honor your ancestors, and I get as many wives as I want. Huh? And I am in charge for life. Okay, that's bullshit. Oh, go get mad at me. Get mad at the ancestors. This book was incredibly ingrained into every system in society, to the point where a driver's test was just quizzes on the book, with little knowledge of driving really required. There are many odd policies that this man made, such as no beards for men under 70, and he once felt that the senators were getting out of shape, so he made a 23-mile-long staircase and ordered all senators and congressmen to walk this hike once a year, except for himself. While this would normally make him a member of the kleptocracy, sadly, cardio kills gains. He also made the capital out of marble and built several statues of his book, and things such as horses and dogs, both of which are sacred in the culture. And that's right, they don't need horses, just camels. This guy was replaced by his dentist in 2007, the one Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow, and he was certainly a ruler. He first abolished the teaching of the Ruhnama and essentially tried to force the previous ruler's weird legacy out of the country, so he could essentially replace it with his own. He attempted to create a cult around him and had leaders deal with his strange displays of power, such as him lifting a golden weight bar, which is baller, and he's definitely a member of the kleptocracy. He outlawed most forms of public performing music and said it's all done by himself. And yes, he made himself legally the MC for the entire country. He also made a rap song about Turkmenistan. He enjoys riding around on horseback rather than a convoy or something similar, and once decided to construct an entire Olympic village in spite of Turkmenistan never once holding the Olympics. He also closed the gates of hell, which was essentially where a bunch of engineers found a natural gas suppository, and just decided to light it on fire and fuck off. But not before the time that the president did donuts in his car near the gates of hell, to disprove a rumor that he had died. Recently, he has passed the torch on to his son, but that has not stopped him from still being an oddball. Now, the country outside of these strange leaders is rather simple. Their flag has very interesting symbolism. The carpet patterns represent the 5 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, crystal, and plasma. This is what happens when you ban all libraries outside the capital, because they, quote, can't read anyway. Next on the chopping block is Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is a country with about 30 million people in it. This country is a double landlocked country, meaning that it is surrounded by landlocked countries, meaning a beach day would require travel through 2 separate countries. And the name Uzbekistan roughly translates to land of the free, which already makes me like this country. The economy is probably the most interesting part of Uzbekistan. A big part of their industry is cotton, to the point where they force people to work in their cotton fields by enslaving their own doctors, students, and government employees, which is certainly an interesting choice. In order to fuel their cotton fields, them and some other Central Asian countries caused the Aral Sea disaster, where over-irrigation from the Aral Sea caused the entire sea to dry. Which just goes to show you the all-too-human nature to make a super metal place to take an album photo. The culture of Uzbekistan is super unique, with many interesting traditions and rituals, such as Sunat Tui, which is essentially a circumcision party. Which reminds me of when the internet said that they were going to have a circumcision party for XXX's son. How should we spread their culture to the rest of the world and show the might of Central Asia? Don't worry, I've already implanted one of our most important traditions into the world's minds. Circumcision parties. What? Circumcision parties. You do them too, right? Right? Anyways, the politics of this country are relatively normal for the region. They have a dictator, Islam Karimov. He'd love to try to one-up America in many of its aspects. Land of the free, after all. Just typically the wrong ones. He saw America using police on its protesters, so he used the military. He saw America give their prisoners awful living conditions. He boiled his alive. Many things in Islam Karimov's are just telltale stories, as the media is heavily oppressed in this country. But it seems like he absolutely hated his family. He was abandoned by his parents to an orphanage, and then they took him back, and then he just got sent back to the orphanage again. So at this point, he must have just hated anything to do with family. He had his daughter on house arrest for several years, and he threatened his own grandchildren at gunpoint to leave his house. That and many other lovely stories that I won't get into. Now, I know this country, kind of made things feel a little bit dark. The final country that I have on the chopping block for today is the lovely Tajikistan. I saved it for last as I expected it to have the least amount of stuff. And I was very wrong. In fact, the reaction I got from saying this was, quote, "What the fuck? What do you mean? Tajikistan is greatest country ever? We destroy Russia and China and Mongolia and America and England. You are fake Western spy." So there's a lot to get into this country. But I'll start out with the more tame things. They have a national sport called Gush Tingiri, which is essentially just wrestling, but each district has a representative known as an Alufta, who is sort of like the big boss of the region, being the best wrestler. You know what you're thinking? This would be a great plot to a show. Sources of the sport are incredibly limited, and anything on it literature-wise was either in Tajik or Uzbek, so it's impossible to really tell too much, at least from my perspective, because apparently I am the only one who cares about this greatest country, whose capital literally translates to Monday. Now let's get into the final national politics section. There's a civil war with like 20 sides on it, and I'll definitely make a video about that later, because it's definitely interesting, but just know it had a long-lasting effect. Terrorism is also a problem in the country, to the point where when looking up facts for the country on a travel website, it warned me about their frequency. Which is insane. They warned about terrorist attacks the same way they warned about poor electricity on the site. Jesus Christ, there was a second plane! Hey, at least wasn't a blackout. The politics today revolve around the president, Emomali Rahman, who has developed a cult personality behind him. Honestly, it's more just standard dictator stuff. He really cracks down on public displays of Islamic faith, despite being a Muslim himself. But honestly, compared to the eternal MC of the country and aggravated menacing on their own grandchildren, he's probably the best behaved dictator in the region. I ended up deciding on just doing every country's relation with each other to further hammer home how Balkan-esque and ridiculous this area is. By the way, if any specific country combination was left out, it was simply either uninteresting or they're slightly friends and neutral to each other. It's good for a long-term, international stability, but pretty bad for a video. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan's relations are great. So great to the point where unification of these countries has been suggested by both sides several times. They have also quote, formed a International Supreme Council, which is a super cool name for what boils down to a bilateral trade agreement. The only hiccup in their relationship was in 2017, where the former president of Kazakhstan claimed that officials were funding and promoting an oppositional candidate. How true this was, I couldn't find, because it was just 8 separate news sites parroting each other and sourcing each other, which was a common theme when researching this video. Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan have a lot of conflict in their past due to various exclaves with Kyrgyzstan, with the two sometimes just closing roads so that people can't leave their enclaves such as Borat. The aforementioned gigafucked region of Sok is also quite funny. This region is typically a source of violence amongst Central Asia, so you'd think they'd bother to monitor it. And they didn't, and Islamic terrorists would frequently use the area as a base of operations. This would be the equivalent of having your terrorist group chill out in the DMZ. Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan's relationship is odd to say the least. It started extremely poor, forced migration of each other's people, raid on the Uzbek embassy, heightened tensions between these two countries. After the bookman died, relationships improved consistently until 2016 with the new Uzbek prime minister. Before this, Turkmenistan was the only Central Asian country with which Uzbekistan had good relations with. Yeah, when researching this, I kept realizing that most countries' relations were alright, but Uzbekistan was always at the center of some BS. Uzbekistan is the equivalent of that one girl back in high school who was always at the center of some drama, making mountains out of molehills, performing elaborate foreskin rituals while drinking horse milk. If you're good at recognizing patterns, you could tell that the Tajik and Uzbek relations would be funny. Tajikistan has planned to build a dam for about 70 years that would make them energy independent from the rest of Central Asia, but the whole Uzbek slave cotton field industry would suffer as a result. So the former president is quoted saying that if there are any dam projects, that it would lead to a Central Asian war. So they clearly don't like each other. But what's even better is that Uzbekistan is the only source of non-opium money that Tajikistan gets, from taxing the imports that go through there via railroad. And Uzbekistan is the only source of power that Tajikistan gets, with some years Uzbekistan getting mad and making it so that only one power plant in the entire country is able to run. Probably the most toxic relationship I've ever seen in a minute, but goddamn, it's funny if you're not suffering from it yourself. Kind of like watching one of those My Strange Addiction videos. Here are some relations that are interesting, but not enough for a paragraph. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have a border dispute over an island, which was a former biological weapons site full of anthrax and nothing really useful. Tajikistan and Turkmenistan are extremely friendly with each other because they are both familial dictatorships, which how on earth is that different from a king or queen, you may ask? No real clue. This video ended up being incredibly fucking long, but luckily I finally finished it. I'll do a Tajikistan Civil War video if it ends up being interesting, but if not, then, you might not ever see it. From now on, I'll just, mess around, still do things on videos if I find interesting. I am technically leaving my niche, by all means, but I think I might, at the beginning of videos, still give you some just general life tips. But it's better for the channel's survivability if I don't force myself to talk about a subject I don't care about anymore. Also, another thing, I have been taking the piss out of the entirety of Central Asia for a video, but, it is hard to condense several pages of research into just however many minutes this ends up being. It's very complex, not every one person is going to be thinking the same way. Also, if you want sources of anything in the video, just know the ghost of the bookman told me all of this. And I'll see you in the next one.